Finally, we have a debate on some reasoning on some issues in the Fox Business Republican candidate debate. This is somewhat different than what we've had so far, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the reasoning on various issues that was raised by the various candidates. Let's talk about what initially was a dispute about budgetary plans between Rand Paul and Rubio, where Rand Paul criticized Rubio's plan as increasing spending and therefore really not a conservative program, a conservative tax plan, and by busting the budget, increased welfare programs so that you really couldn't call it a conservative tax plan. Rubio shot back and called Rand an isolationist. Now, what does that have to do with the tax plan? I don't know. But he knows that's his weak point. So he did that because he was being drawn out as really as a liberal, as a tax and spend guy. And he's going to bust the budget, increase federal spending. And so Rubio knows what Rand Paul's supposed weak point is. So he calls him an isolationist. So then the discussion shifted over towards whether you can be a strong military power and defend your country well if you're going bankrupt, which was Paul's argument. And Rubio really could not respond to that. But finally, in one of these debates, somebody points out the facts. The fact that the United States spends 10 times more than any other than all the next countries combined. So we are already the overwhelmingly strongest military on earth by far. But Rubio isn't satisfied. He wants to spend more. And so does Trump, and so does Cruz. And even Fiorina, which he didn't mention it in this debate. So, really, the people don't know the facts. They don't know that we are already the strongest military power. We are already spending more than the next 10 nations combined. Why is it that they can be safe, like Russia can be safe by spending 1/12 of what we spend? Well, because we're not spending money for defense. We're spending money for influence, to lean on people, to threaten people, to get people to do what we want, to influence. That's the truth on that issue. But there was some back and forth with some of the facts getting out. The main fact is we are already the overwhelmingly strongest national military in the world, and we spend far more than any other country, and enough to keep us completely safe without having to increase more spending. And Rubio was drawn out as really a liberal tax and spend guy. Very disappointing for the Rubio people, I guess. Anyway, the other candidates all were rah-rah, bigger spending, like Trump. We got to have the strongest national spending defense program ever. We already do. But there's nothing new about that. Apparently, nobody talks about the facts. Anyway, that was one example of how reasoning crept into this debate. Let's talk about some more examples. On minimum wage, you see a clear difference between Kasich and Carson. Carson explains very clearly and very simply that if you raise the minimum wage, you will increase unemployment. Less people will be hired. It's the law of supply and demand. You increase the price of something, demand for that, whatever it is, will go down. Assuming there's some flexibility in the market, it's not completely inflexible. That's a economic term. We don't have to get into that. But anyway, that's a natural assumption because almost all markets have some flexibility in them. Now, Kasich, he says he doesn't want to think about theories or reasoning. He raised the minimum wage in Ohio, and he thinks it's fine. And the people that want to not raise it, they are partial to theory, and he's partial to the people. So there you get an insight into that, into Kasich's thinking and mind, and you get an insight into Carson's mind. The other candidates, some of them came out against raising minimum wage like Trump, but he didn't explain why. That's the point. It's the reasoning that is starting to filter into these debates, at least this one, which was absent in the other debates. Other candidates also said they were against it, raising the minimum wage, but they didn't explain why. Carson did. Okay. So, what else do we got? We have federal spending. Now, Kasich was asked about federal spending, and he really could not say that he was going to reduce it. How he was going to reduce it, Maria Bartiromo asked him. He wouldn't answer. He didn't answer specifically. And so really the only person on stage that has proposed a reduction in federal spending is Rand Paul. And in the previous discussion that I was talking about, he pointed out that this fact, that he was for the penny plan, for example, that where you reduce 1 penny per dollar every year and you balance your budget. None of these people, except Rand Paul, want to reduce federal spending. Now, implicitly in some of what Carly Fiorina has said is reduction in federal spending, because she has put out some good reasoning on why a big government is a mistake and why it is the ruination of the economy. And she explains pretty well how the big government ruins individual small businesses. They can't cope with the regulations, whereas the big businesses can. How you go to crony capitalism, how it evolves into special interest groups protecting their turf. And so she had a good grasp on, in theory, in principle, what's wrong. The way she formulates it is big government. That's the problem that we have. And she was good in this sense. She removed it from party. It's not about your party. That's not the problem, because it's happened under both parties that we have increased the government. Many of the other candidates don't make that point, and they try to use party politics and say it's a party issue, when in fact it's true that under both parties the government has increased. It's also true that under Obama it's increased more than any other time in our history, and that the federal debt has ballooned more under Obama than any other time in history. And the candidates did not say what they were going to do on how to reduce the debt, except for Rand Paul, who he did say that he had offered 3 plans, and I already talked about the penny plan and others, and that he wants a very small government, and in other words, he's willing to reduce federal spending, which is the key thing, because as I've said before, once you spend the money, you have to tax it from the citizens, or you have to take it away from them by reducing the power, the spending power of their dollar. In other words, inflating the currency, which is what we're doing right now. We do both. So the people have to pay for it one way or another once the money is spent. And that's a big difference between the candidates, and you could see it in this debate. Jeb Bush said that he would increase growth, and he mentioned a lot of things, but he really didn't explain the reasoning of why his proposal is any different than the others, and why it makes sense, and how he was going to get to the 4% growth. So I wasn't impressed with that. I was disappointed with the way Rand Paul handled the inequality question. He pointed out that under the Democrats there's more inequality, which is true, but he should have used that as an opportunity to explain where the inequality comes from, and to jive with what he later explained on how you have to reduce spending and reduce the size of government, and actually that is what's causing the greatest inequality, and also maybe make some unpopular points like it's really not important how much inequality there is. What's important is the general prosperity of the nation. And so there could be no inequality if everybody becomes very poor, like the communists promise all the time. And they also achieve that. Anyway, another interesting issue that was debated and discussed was immigration. Of course, Trump has his plan to arrest the 11 million illegal immigrants and send them back to whatever country they're from, and then bring them back expeditedly. And his reasoning for why we have to do that is that's the law. So if we're going to have a country and we're going to have laws, we have to follow the law. Obviously, there's a question I asked him in a gaggle reporting before, which is, why can't we just change the law? I mean, and some of the other candidates like Kasich and Jeb pointed out how ridiculous and that was, but they didn't exactly explain how it was going to harm the economy to remove 11 million working, peaceful, productive people and send them back. Nobody explained that. And even though it was asked, but the moderators let them sidestep the follow-up question, which is one of the defects that these debates have. By the way, if I haven't said it so far, this debate was much better than any of the other debates, and did not really focus on trying to pit one candidate against the other and insults ad hominems and spats, etc. So what else do we have there? Well, you got an insight into who can think about economic issues better and who is worse at it. Like I said before, Carson explained very well why minimum wage is no good. He also defended his flat tax very well, why it's fair, and he also defended the attacks against his character. He was the only one that they really shot at as far as ruining his credibility by being a liar. He took care of that question very well. So I was impressed with him, although he didn't get that much time. And so what other points can we make here? Cruz thinks that you cannot have immigrants because it brings down the wages of the workers that you have. So if that were true, we should get rid of 50 million people from the United States, then the wages of the remaining people would go up and everything would be great. It's not true. Immigration helps increase prosperity because of all sorts of reasons, which I've explained in my analysis on Trump's immigration plan and other times. But that you get a sense of who understands how economics works. Carly Fiorina, in her answers, always shows great understanding of how it works, I guess because she was the CEO of Hewlett-Packard and her business experience. And she had some good proposals about zero-sum budgeting, where you can cut any expense and nothing's protected, which is a good idea. But I didn't get exactly what her specific plan was. So what else was explained? Well, she did explain this, that in this kind of economy, a big government economy, innovation and entrepreneurship are crushed, and they are the engines of prosperity. Freedom is crushed because you are overwhelmed by government regulation, high government taxes, and that just reduces the possibility of any small business being successful. Now, I'm going to give a quick explanation of something that was mentioned in the junior debate, the earlier debate, that Governor Christie pointed out very well, which is the key difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in general, and that is that the Democrats want to substitute their judgment, the judgment of the government. They want to substitute the individual's judgment for the judgment of the government. In other words, they want to implement the government's judgment over the judgment of the individual, which is one of the consequences of being a socialist instead of a capitalist. Under capitalism, you respect the individual judgment of the citizens on minimum wage, on whether they want to do charity or not, whether they, etc. You respect their judgment, and under socialism, it's the idea that the government can decide better than the individual, and is wiser, and will dispose of the individual's resources better than the individual. That's a key difference in philosophy between the Republicans and the Democrats, and Christie in the first debate mentioned that to his credit. He explained it very well. So why is it that a planned economy is less efficient than a capitalist economy where the individuals decide? Why is it that the government can't do as good a job as the individual does in making key decisions? You want to read von Mises, he's very clear on that. But the reason actually comes from answering two basic questions. One is, who knows more about your life, your business, what you should invest, how much you should save, how much you should spend? Do you know more about that, or does a government bureaucrat know more about that? Now, once you ask that question, it becomes very clear that you obviously know more, even if you're not real smart and you didn't take a lot of academic classes in the universities, because you have the facts. The bureaucrat does not have the facts. He doesn't know you. He doesn't know your situation. He doesn't know how much you should spend, how much you should save, whether you should invest in this or not. He doesn't know the bakery business that you have on the corner of your town. He doesn't know anything about how much donuts should sell for. He doesn't know which donuts the people like. He doesn't know anything. If he's making the decisions, the business is sunk. That's why the more central planning there is, in other words, the more socialistic, communistic government you have, the less efficiency, the more poverty, and then you achieve a lot of equality for 99% of the people, except the people that run the government, which are always an exception. The other reason why, and this is the reason that is usually brought up, why capitalist system works better and is what they always refer to as incentives. In other words, this question: who cares more about whether your bakery business goes bankrupt, you or the bureaucrat in Washington? Well, of course, he doesn't even know you. He doesn't care if it goes bankrupt. He may be a very kind-hearted guy and care a lot about people in general. He may be an angel, or maybe not. But he certainly doesn't care about it as much as you do. And that's the thing. Under a capitalist free market society, the individual who cares about the consequences of his actions, his destiny, his life, his future, makes the decision, not the bureaucrat. And that is the other basic reason why it's more efficient. So that's the underlying reasoning, and that's a big separation between the inclination of most of the Republican candidates versus the inclination of the Democrats, which we analyzed last time. Thank you for watching. Sorry about that.